So today we might be doing something a little different. What do I mean by that? Well, let's just say that instead of another video game of Spider-Man like last time, we're gonna be covering most of his cartoons. So we start our journey with the 67 cartoon. And other than meme's sake, I can see why people don't really talk about this one a lot. Like, it's your typical adventures of Spider-Man stopping bad guys like the Green Goblin. And here you get the most basic and literal depiction of the characters. Like, for example, J.J. Jameson hates Spider-Man. And that's all of his character. Or Peter Parker is a nerd. You know, stuff like that. And bless them for trying with such a tight budget, but it is pretty obvious. From the limited animations to straight up reusing backgrounds from another show entirely in only 2 episodes, weirdly enough. Easily the best episode of this show is The Origin of Spider-Man. What makes it stand out isn't the fact that it's an origin story. No. What makes it stand out is that visually, it pretty much great choice of color, great composition, and great shading. Unlike pretty much the rest of the episodes in all 3 seasons. So yeah, in conclusion, even though it's not the best, it's clear that Ralph Bakshi and his team tried the very best they could with such a limited budget. And that's admirable. I do wonder what his take would have been if he had more of a creative grip. Our next Spider-Man cartoon comes from the 80s and is once again called just Spider-Man. In this one, the style changed, trying to look more like a He-Man cartoon. And remember how I described the 1967 cartoon characters as one note? Well, imagine if you took those same characters and then 80fied them. Like poured 80s trope all over them. That's Spider-Man 1981 for you. Doesn't help that this show can get freaking weird sometimes. Like, there's an entire episode where Spider-Man shrinks size because we clearly needed a Honey I Shrunk Spider-Man. It also doesn't really help that this show kind of feels safe and bland. Like, you could argue the same thing with the 1967 cartoon, but at least that one had the advantage of being off-model and weird. Man, I don't know what it is with 80s cartoon adaptations. They always manage to suck out the fun and charm of the source material. But enough of that, as along with this show, there was also Spidey and his amazing friends. This is hated apparently, and I don't get the hate. I mean, it's not like if his friends are annoying. If anything, I think they add the spice that, ironically enough, Spider-Man solo show from the same time lacks. I'd say it's much better than Spider-Man 1981, but not by much. Now here's one we're all familiar with, Spider-Man the Animated Series. With this, it's like if you took the 1981 cartoon, gave it more personality, makes it actually takes itself seriously while you're not overdo it. It's great. If I can complain about one thing, it's that sometimes they reuse animations and it can be pretty obvious. And although sometimes it looks pretty gorgeous, it can also sometimes be kinda stiff. But overall, you get far more interesting tales, actually engaging characters, and even villains that I can actually sympathize with? Now that's a real shocker. In addition to this, instead of being the usual damsel in distress, MC actually plays a huge role in not only learning how she was raised, but sometimes she even saves the day herself. That's really refreshing. The stories have a strong continuity, except when they don't. So overall, despite the limited story and animation, I'd say that this is pretty good. Not the best one, mind you, but still pretty good. So before Spider-Man 2099's hopefully terrifying appearance in Across the Spider-Verse, we got Spider-Man Unlimited, which takes place in the dystopian future of... Wait, you're telling me this does not take place in the future? Well, that's disappointing. I mean, 2099 is in his name, but whatever. But anyway, this show tries to make Spider-Man a lot more dark and edgy. Oh my god, that's so awesome. Don't worry though, it handles it a lot better than Bomberman actually will ever could. On counter Earth, there are these human-animal hybrids known as bestials. And honestly, the way they were introduced is very jarring. Weirdly enough, I'd say that this show is kind of like if you just inserted Spider-Man into He-Man but made all the humans furries. Oh, I'm sorry, bestials. And weirdly enough, I really dig that. Makes it feel a lot more natural. But as a whole, this show is only kinda okay. So we all know the trilogy classic by Sam Raimi.
Pizza time.
But did you know there was a poorly aged, well at least visually, cartoon that only lasted a season that follows after the first movie? And no, Tobey Maguire does not voice Peter in this cartoon. And yeah, let's talk about the visuals for a moment. You can tell this was made when 3D was still relatively new, like a couple of years after Toy Story. And unfortunately, since it is early 3D, that does mean that in this case, even if it is cel-shaded, it still aged like milk. And the way it's animated is kind of like if it was motion captured. That is not a positive, it just makes it uncanny. As a follow-up to the Sam Raimi movies, they surprisingly break a lot of rules established in those movies, like Peter and MJ clearly being in love, or Harry looking absolutely nothing like Harry. But on its own, its tonal shift into college edge lends itself surprisingly well into the narrative. There are only 5 recurring villains that are recognizable, while the rest are original, and unfortunately, the original ones, ironically enough, aren't as memorable as the recurring ones. But it makes it up for all of that by being delightfully entertaining. We did it, fellas. We finally reached the best one. So, Spectacular Spider-Man is a perfect example of one of the most faithful adaptations ever. And unlike, say, the 1981 cartoon, it actually puts a spin on it to make it more unique, without seeming to blend, no less. Characters are engaging and have endearing and believable motivations. Both of Peter's life as Spidey and as himself are delightfully entertaining. The cast is also more layered and overall not one note. It also seems that, unlike the 90s animated series, Peter can actually grow and learn. And that's without mentioning the fact that the villains are just as fun to watch as the protagonists with delightful designs. The show's art style is reminiscent of shows like Kim Possible, and I think that works in the show's favor to make the action scenes look way better. Now, we all know and love the Ultimate Spider-Man comics. This is the only one I have, by the way. But the next one we're going to be talking about is named after Ultimate Spider-Man and is a loose adaptation, but it is not as good and is completely different. Spider-Man having his own team of superheroes. Now that sounds like a good idea. Okay, so the first thing is this show loves to do fofo breaks, particularly with Peter. And let's just say he doesn't know when to shut up. Like every 2 minutes he's gotta say something stupid. Like Bubsy. Yeah, it's almost like if he's trying to be Deadpool, but not as funny or endearing. You know, there might be a reason no other Spider-Man cartoon has done that before or ever since. Also, said superheroes are also one note. Again, some of them only appear for like once per episode. Also, this show looks passable. It's not bad, but it's not great either. Fight scenes are pretty good, but they're even better when team fights. And I get what they were trying to do with the look of the show, trying to look like the comic. But honestly, it just kinda looks like they upscaled the comics and washed out the colors. This show sucks, plain and simple. And I really hope our last stop can... Oh, who am I kidding? It's Spider-Man 2017. Of course not. Last stop, the most blandest Spider-Man cartoon of all time. Spider-Man 2017. With Ultimate Spider-Man, you could at least argue that the shading looked pretty, but here, it just looks black. Another problem is the fact that since everyone is smart, that pretty much makes Peter less special. Like, I get why Gwen and Miles are smart, but why everyone else? It just makes the show feel like Jimmy Neutron and his clones, the show. Oh, and Spider-Man. And speaking of characters, the villains also feel one note. Again. And for some bizarre reason, in this show, the Sinister Six episodes are about Spider-Man fighting the Sinister Six individually. Not together, separately. Jesus Christ. Peter and Harry's bond are pretty sweet. It's only in season 1 though. They also overcomplicated the suit designs of the villains, which sucks because they had potential, but they had to go one step further. The colors here feel mutated, and that doesn't help the show at all. And these designs are bland and generic. What's a moral to a video like this? The one thing you should do, however, is check out Spectacular Spider-Man, which is on Netflix. But yeah, see you guys next time.